This week on How's the Market, I do something that we don't often do. I just do a solo podcast talking about the 3 things every buyer needs to know right now. And I'll tell you, I'll give you a sneak peek. Prices, inventory, and mortgage rates. How do you break those down? How do you be the educator in this market? Go in and listen to the How's the Market podcast. Welcome back to the How's the Market podcast. This week we're going to do something a little bit different. This is going to be a solo podcast. I'm going to talk about 3 things I believe we need to be educating every buyer on right now. This is a critical time for anybody thinking about buying a home because they're being inundated with information on the NAR settlement and wondering maybe what that means to them. So our job is to be the educator. As we start this podcast, I think there's plenty of information on the NAR settlement, and that's evolving, and how that will be handled, and what you need to say and what you need to do. And certainly at the state level, that is going to be different depending on the different states that you operate in. But we know right now that the earliest that the settlement will be take effect is in August, and that could certainly be pushed back, but that's what we know. And we also know that our job is to be the educator out in the market. And so the reason for this topic today is to reinforce the fact that we can still be educating on what's happening out in the market, and that is something that's not changed about our business. A lot of things have changed relative to how we may do business and what that may mean, but nothing has changed relative to our need to be the educator. And I've said that many, many times, but I think if there were a way to think about the business right now, I would offer this in maybe a way to hear this message is today we're working on building our knowledge, and I think any agent that is operating effectively today has a solid source or a solid foundation of knowledge that they're building in the business. And they're doing that every single day. And there's probably industry knowledge they've got to build. There's national market knowledge, what's happening. There's certainly the local market knowledge that you need to have, but all those 3 things, kind of build this foundation or this understanding of what's going on in the business. Then once you have that, then you have to have a good way to share that knowledge, and that could be on a video that you record, maybe a blog that you post, social media, whatever the case is. You got to share that knowledge and can share it in many ways, one to many, on a platform like a social platform, or you can share it one-on-one in a conversation. But you have to be able to share the knowledge base that you have. And then the third element of this that makes it successful is you have to then be able to engage on that knowledge base. One of the things that I'm going to be doing along with several other folks that Tom Ferry is working on right now is a program called the Listing Challenge that's coming up. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. I'm sure it's on Tom's site. But how do you take knowledge and engage that knowledge to develop listings? Now, I have a core belief right now where we sit in the business. It's May. We're rolling into June, in the midpoint of the year. And here's what that belief is, that the second half of this year will be stronger than the first half. A lot of reasons for that. I'm seeing a lot of signs on that. I think we'll be in a better interest rate environment. I think we'll see more people, get back into the market in the second half of the year. And so I think right now we are preparing for that. So if somebody's thinking about buying, there are 3 elements that I think that they need to consider and that you need to be the educator on and bring that knowledge to them. First area is prices. What's going on with prices in this country? I'm going to break that down from you and give you everything that we have from Keeping Current Matters on this. The second area is inventory. What's going on with that? We did a survey of agents here recently. The number one issue in market after market is inventory, the lack thereof. And so we want to stay educated on that. And third is mortgage rates. A critical piece of the equation to go out and buy a home is the financing and the ability to do that so in an affordable way. And that's been a significant challenge. Now, I am going to do this as well on this podcast In the show notes, there will be a link to some slides that I use, some visuals. Certainly Keeping Current Matters. We believe that visuals do a great job of telling the story of what's happening in the market, and so I'll link those for you in this podcast. But Bankrate came out with a quote, and I'm going to read it here. I think it sums things up. It says, "Buy now or wait." That's really the question that I think many people have on their minds. That's the question prospective homeowners have been struggling to answer in today's housing market. Home prices have been skyrocketing recently, and the Federal Reserve's work to tame inflation sent mortgage rates soaring too. And the combination has led to would-be buyers waiting to pick the wait side of the equation. So meaning prices have risen, mortgage rates have risen. People say we're just going to wait on buying a home. And oh, by the way, all of that impacts affordability. The most difficult, according to NAR, the most difficult affordability we've seen in 40 years in this country. We have an affordability graphic. You like to use NAR's Housing Affordability Index. And when you see the graphic, I'll include it in the notes, you see that it's at a lower point than it's been in quite some time. The way that you read the affordability index, the lower it is, the less affordable homes are. And what we know about really the last 10 years, maybe even the last 15 years, is that we've been in a time of extreme affordability. The years coming out of 2008 when distressed properties dominated the market, homes were very, very affordable. And then we went into the 2010s, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, into the early 2020s, and homes were very, very affordable, primarily due to rising wages and very, very low mortgage rates. We certainly remember that about COVID. But what's the story relative to prices? Well, there are a couple things that I would point to right now. One, surveys are done consistently that consumers say they believe home prices are going to go down in the next 12 months. Well, when you look at Case-Shiller and FHFA and those that respond and report on home prices, you see that's not the case. Over the last 12 months, we've seen consistent home price appreciation. Maybe in the worst case in January of this year, maybe sort of stagnant prices, but not prices going down. Why is that? Because there are fewer homes across the country than the number of people that want to buy them. There are less homes on the market than the number of people that want to go out and purchase those homes. And that keeps upward pressure on prices and has for quite some time. Now, not what we saw in 2020 and 21 and 22 when there was sort of enormous and outpaced appreciation in the market, but certainly seeing that continue on. When we look at 2024 and the forecasters that look ahead to prices this year, the average that forecasters say, or average that they're saying right now, is a little over 3% price appreciation in residential real estate. That's a very, very normal real estate appreciation market that we see. And so, I think looking at the likelihood prices going down is just not in the cards. It's not out there for a number of different reasons. Even if you look ahead, we've talked about this at Keeping Current Matters, the Home Price Expectation Survey, which is a group of 100 economists, housing market experts that look at the market and say what's going to be on the horizon. They even say over the next 5 years, we'll see very normal price appreciation. And so what's my message right now on prices? Is that they're going up, but they're not going up at the rate that we saw back during the COVID years, the unicorn years in this country, where we saw unhealthy price appreciation, but very normal price appreciation. And so if somebody's waiting because they're worried about prices, then that's not a concern that I think is valid. And I think we can do a good job educating someone. An interesting fact in the market is that the average priced home in this country, if purchased today, stands to grow in equity by about $83,000. So what do you stand to lose over the next 5 years? About $83,000 in equity if you don't purchase today. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is ready or willing or needs to purchase right now. That's certainly not the case. But if somebody is hesitant because of prices or they think prices are going to crash, that's an area that we can educate them on. The biggest contributor to prices really our next topic is inventory. What's happening with inventory in this country? And I think the lack of inventory over the last several years has been the culprit for massively rising prices. And I'm not saying anything that you don't already know about that. So the question is, when do we start to see more inventory in this country? Because that's what we need. We need more. We can't sell what we don't have as far as the product of homes, whether they be existing or new construction. A couple of things that are interesting. When you look at this past month, there are more existing homes for sale this past month than what we saw in 2023, what we saw in 2022, what we saw in 2021. So inventory is increasing. Now we are less than what we had in 2020. So kind of coming out of this hole of lack of inventory, which is a good thing. Still not what we saw coming into the pandemic, but better than the last 3 years that I mentioned, 23, 22, and 21. Now, here's what's also interesting. At the time that I'm recording this podcast here in late May, the inventory this same week compared to 2023, there are 36% more available homes on the market this week as compared to last year, but 36% below the same week in 2019. If that gives you just a mental image, 36% above last year, but 36% below 2019. And so, we are seeing more listings come to market, more active inventory in the market, but not what we saw prior to COVID and prior to the sort of the years that were COVID. And then another interesting statistic that I think you need to be armed with is 1 in 3 homes on the market today are new construction. They're coming from builders. And as we see challenges with mortgage rates and affordability, like I talked about earlier, builders are figuring out a way to, sort of navigate that and offer an incentive in, the place or in the time where people often think, can I afford a home? Well, a builder can come in and offer an incentive, maybe a 2-1 buy down, maybe some type of way to get a rate and get a payment that somebody can, afford and allow them to participate in home ownership. Danielle Hale from Realtor.com said this: sellers are starting to warm up to the current environment, wading into the market in increasing numbers despite market mortgage rates that are likely above their existing rate if they have a mortgage. As seller optimism swells, we may see even further inventory gains later in the season that will likely create a more balanced environment for hopeful home buyers. Here's what I think that means, and I think Danielle Hale said it very, very well. We're seeing more inventory coming into the market. I think that will benefit us in the second half of the year when you see more people enter into the market for a number of different reasons. Maybe they put off buying a home. We'll talk just a minute about mortgage rates, more inventory, more choices. And I think that's what we're setting up for. Now, as we sit at the midpoint of the year, our job right now is to be ready for that, to be out in the market, to be vocal, to be the educator. We started off talking about being the educator on this podcast, and that's our job right now. But let's talk about mortgage rates for a second, because we have been in an extremely volatile market. The daily mortgage rate, I'm looking at it right now, was up towards the end of the year, started to come down, it's gone up again, and all of that due to several different things. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of perspectives here and give you some quotes from some really smart people, but there are 3 things that I would be looking at right now relative to mortgage rates. First is paying attention to geopolitical events, things happening out in the world that have an impact on mortgage rates. Instability in the world does affect the mortgage market. And whenever people are starting to question, okay, what's going to happen? How is this going to affect us politically? Or, how is this going to affect markets? That impacts mortgage rates. Second, inflation impacts mortgage rates. When we start to hear questions of is inflation coming up, or maybe inflation is tapering off. Still not today where the Fed wants us to sort of see inflation. But inflation has a massive impact on mortgage rates. I always say that inflation will always be the enemy of long-term interest rates, which mortgage rates are. And as long as they're high, we'll see high mortgage rates. Third, the Fed has an impact on mortgage rates. The Fed controls the Fed funds rate. Everybody's waiting for the Fed to cut rates. That's not mortgage rates. Hopefully you know that listening to this podcast. But what we do know is the Fed's signal of cutting rates will mean that we are getting through some of the issues that we have faced relative to inflation in this country and some of the economic issues that we've faced. So Odetta Cushy said this: every month brings a new set of inflation and Labor Day that can influence the direction of mortgage rates. Ongoing inflation deceleration, a slowing economy, and even geopolitical uncertainty can contribute to lower mortgage rates. On the other hand, data that signals upside risk to inflation may result in higher rates. So depending on what comes out, based on what Odetta's saying on inflation, you're going to see a volatile mortgage market, which we have absolutely seen. I think the consensus right now is that we'll get a rate cut sometime in the fall, but certainly that could change as we go through the next several months. We know that has changed over time dramatically. And I think the odds of a September cut, we started out at the beginning of April, that being almost like a shoe-in, to where today it's not as high. About 3 out of 4 of the folks that forecast rate cuts say we should see one in September. That was almost 100% as we began April, but it's fallen down. When I look at projections, I'm gonna link to the projections in the slides that I give you. They go through the middle of 2025. The average is somewhere around 6.1%, 6.17%, and certainly. As we go through that, we expect rates to come down and expect that we'll continue to be in a downward trending mortgage rate environment. And that will be, the direction of that will be predicated by the information that we get relative to the economy, to inflation, to geopolitical events, to what the Fed does, all of that. So we'll stay connected to it. There are two things that I think are important right now if you're an agent, certainly if you're a loan officer too, in the business right now. One, stay connected to a source of information. You have to be able to do that. And two, have a partner in the business that you can trust, that you can navigate. That means if you're an agent, have a great lender partner that can help your clients navigate this environment. If you are a lender, have a great agent partner that you can bring that value to. We always say, most agents in the business know what's happening. The good agents understand it, but the great agents can explain what's happening. And I think having a partner will help you explain what's happening, a partner that understands what's going on in this business. So those are the three things that I think we need to be vocal about: prices, inventory, mortgage rates right now in the business, and be the educators on. So all of the information that I covered in this podcast is going to be in the show notes. You can download those, grab the slides, use those as you educate those that you work with. And everything that we do at Keeping Current Matters is so we can invite you into the conversations we're having, because I always say this: if you're here in our office in Richmond, Virginia, we believe every family should feel confident when buying and selling a home. We have it printed on a wall. And if you're ever here, you have to come and see that. But that's why we do what we do, so that we can help families feel confident when buying and selling a home. So thank you for joining the Housing Market Podcast. We'll be back again next week. And listen, if you like this podcast, share it with somebody that needs to be the educator, that needs this information. Get the information out there so that we can help make a difference out in the world.